talk about politics. How do you all feel about immigration? How about healthcare? Okay, these are phrases and questions that cause many Americans to tense up or walk on eggshells. Despite the tense nature that politics may cause, it's the foundation of our country. Without 3 branches of government, a House, a Senate, and a President, America simply wouldn't be the America that we know today. But politics hasn't always been this one set-in-stone system. There hasn't always been one Republican and one Democrat party. The beliefs, systems, and overall nature of politics has changed drastically throughout our nation's history. And it's pretty fascinating. Hi, I'm Kilgallen, and I'm here to discuss with you all the ever-changing system of politics, how it affects our nation, our people, and ultimately, society as a whole. When thinking of a topic to discuss with you all this afternoon, I wanted it to be something I'm really passionate about. Politics is an interest I've had since the 8th grade, a time in which candidates' campaigns for the 2016 election really started to pick up. Being that I was only 14 at the time, I didn't exactly have much to compare this to, but I knew it was a unique election climate. I sat and watched speeches, debates, rallies, and felt nearly every emotion. Happy, scared, excited, confused. I understood the hot topics, immigration, women's rights, healthcare, but I also knew that these topics didn't just appear. They evolved from previous leaders and ultimately the wants of the American people. This year, I'm taking United States history, and we cover practically every time period, from pre-Christopher Columbus up to around the presidency of Obama. When learning about the first political party, the Federalist Party, I was fascinated that Americans had made such a jump, from a one-party system in 1797 to the modern-day two-party system, implemented in 1869. Naturally, throughout that 72-year gap, political parties emerged and faded away. Their focus is shifting as times are changing. But I couldn't help but ask myself a question. Why is it that America experienced so many political parties? Why and how did we evolve into this divide? Republicans and Democrats. Seemingly big questions, but there's a simple common denominator: the American people. As society grows and as the economy suffers, as immigrants come in and a social revolution occurs, it's strong American citizens that change political parties, ultimately evolving our government. Although not all Americans are political leaders, we are in charge of the nature of our political climate. People express their viewpoints and spark a movement of change that they feel needs to occur. We've seen the same issue evolve progressively throughout history. Take women's rights, for example. The first meeting of the women's suffrage movement occurred in Seneca Falls, New York in 1848. The simple action of women gathering to meet sparked a movement and revolution that's carried us on to modern day. The Women's March of 2019 is simply just an extent off of what was started in 1848. Obviously, now women have the right to vote, but the women's movement has grown and continues to grow, focusing on issues that fit the more modern woman, such as birth control, abortion, and the state of Planned Parenthood. As a society, we progress, ultimately causing political reform and policy to progress with us. Believe it or not, in the mid-1930s, welfare was considered a radical and socialist policy. Implemented by Franklin Delano Roosevelt in the peak of the Great Depression, welfare was a helpful solution to the mass poverty occurring in our nation. Over 13 million Americans were out of work, living conditions were abysmal, and children were starving. It seemed as if the Americans needed more than just a simple clothing donation from a local charity. They needed federal assistance, so FDR did something about it. The needs and the wants of the American people influenced a political leader, ultimately evolving and changing political reform to come. See where I'm going here? Later, FDR continued implementing his socialist policies when he introduced Social Security, something that all U.S. citizens have today. Nowadays, a vast majority of Americans consider these programs to be a fundamental part of our nation. Many go as far to say that it's even a right. As time has evolved and Americans have been able to see the effects that welfare and Social Security have, the opinions regarding these have greatly evolved. As I've mentioned throughout my talk, political viewpoints are dependent on the times. So I thought it would be interesting to analyze how different generations fall on the political spectrum. The Pew Research Center wrote a great article titled "The Generation Gap in American Politics," and it helps explain why such different generations have varying viewpoints. 4 generations are analyzed: the millennials, born in the years 1981 to 1996, Generation Z, born in the years 1965 to 1980, the baby boomers, born in the years 1946 to 1964, and the silents, born in the years 1928 to 1945. The first-year approval ratings for both Trump and Obama were looked at for each generation. 67% of millennials and 56% of Gen Xers approved the way that Obama was handling his presidency in the first year, whereas only 29% of millennials and 36% of Gen Xers approved the way that Trump was handling his presidency throughout the first year. We see a different aspect of approval with the baby boomer and silent generations. 46% of baby boomers and 44% of silents approved the way that Trump was handling his presidency throughout the first year. All right, so just from those statistics, we see that the baby boomers and the silents are much more liberal and left-leaning generations than that of the millennials and the Gen Xers. But why is that? It could be because nearly 79% of silents are white, whereas over 40% of millennials identify as a different ethnicity other than white. Another attributing reason can be the decline in religion, mainly Christianity. 62% of silents feel that God is necessary to be moral, whereas only 29% of millennials feel that way. Oftentimes, devout Christians are a little more conservative to keep in line with church values, so a decline in Christianity could lead to a decline in conservative viewpoints. All of these statistics and possible attributions to a much more left-leaning society led me to ask the question, what's to come for my generation? Generation Z, born in the years 1996 to 2010. Many of us aren't able to vote yet, so it's hard to see where we'll fall on the political spectrum, but we are starting to take action. Gen Zers are the generation to make the change. We use social media as a platform, spark movements, marches, and rallies. The March for Our Lives movement, which occurred last year in 2018, incorporated many Gen Zers and high school age students all across the nation. But in 2019, I've noticed a sense of divisiveness. People lean either so far left or so far right that moderate Democrats and Republicans are diminishing. To me, this is a little scary. As someone who identifies as a moderate, I think it's crucial that American people and leaders understand each other, but not necessarily agree. Although many Gen Zers aren't able to vote yet, it's crucial that we ask ourselves 2 questions. What do we want for America, and how can we, as America's future leaders, make a better place? Whether you're a Gen Zer, a millennial, or a silent, I urge you all to ask what you can impact. As Americans, we have the power to change or evolve any political policy we want. We can spark a movement. I want to leave you all with a quote that I find truly applicable to political evolution and the power inside of all of us. Never doubt that a few caring people can't change the world, for indeed, that's all we'll ever have. Thank you.